it's time to start this, let's say, this appointment within the CEDRIC webinar initiatives. And actually, the CEDRIC webinar initiatives derive from, let's say, a project, which is the CEDRIC project that has been financed by the Int'l Italia, Austria, and co-funded by the European Union. The CEDRIC project involves several entities as the ICGEB as coordinator, leading partner, then University of Udine, the Free University of Bolzano, the University of Innsbruck, and then other, let's say, project partners like the CICIT Group, Echenbichler, the BioTreat, and ERSA. Basically, the title of the project is Creating of a Sustainable Cross-Border Agro-Ecosystem by Leveraging Root Microbiome Biodiversity. And the main aim of CEDRIC is to strengthen the microbiological biodiversity of areas and soils characterized by a poor or an altered microbial ecosystem. Basically, the main aim of the CEDRIC project is to develop and validate methods, let's say, concerning the root microbiome transplantation. And the other, let's say, main aspect are related to the creation of a platform for agricultural, scientific, and business stakeholder in order to promote the transnational and scientific knowledge to sustainable methods applicable in field, and also to develop the training program and dissemination programs which are focused on the role of healthy microbiome in soil ecosystem and agricultural productivity, and all the benefit associated with this aspect. So, let's say, related to this last point, we had, let's say, the task and the honor to develop this series of webinar, which basically follow under three main, let's say, big topics, which are the soil health and the biodiversity, the bioinoculants for agriculture, and the sustainability and science communication. And in particular, the seminar we will hear today by Lucrezia Lamastra is within this last topic. And in this table, you can see, let's say, the program of the webinar we are going to, let's say, to give or to organize in the next future. And after the seminar of today, given by, again, Lucrezia, the next appointment will be on the next 6th of February, in which our, let's say, project partner, Silvia, will give a very interesting seminar about biostimulant. So to introduce our today's seminar, I would like also to introduce Lucrezia. Lucrezia Lamastra graduated in chemistry and pharmaceutical technology at the University of Turin in 2005, and she obtained a PhD degree in 2010 from the Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore in Piacenza. Currently, she is associate professor in agricultural chemistry at the same university, and during her career, basically, she developed a growing interest in sustainability, and this led her to coordinate and participate in different nationally relevant projects. In particular, over the last decades, her research has been dedicated to examining the, let's say, the complex relationship between agriculture, food production, consumption, and environmental sustainability. And her activities has basically been focused on assessing the impact of water usage and climate change within the food production system. And to, let's say, to pursue her research objectives, basically she applied multidisciplinary approach involving chemical analysis, environmental modeling, and LCA methodology that has been basically employed to evaluate and to mitigate environmental impacts, providing valuable insights into enhancing the sustainability of the food system. So before leaving the floor to Lucrezia, I would like to make some, let's say, practical recommendations. So I would like all the participants to invite all the participants to make sure that their microphones are muted during the presentation. And at the end of the presentation, the webinar, we will have a question and answer session. And so if you have question, you can, let's say, you can book your slot by raising the hand or by typing the question in the chat. And I would also like to remind you that the webinar is recorded, and so the recording will be shared on the project website soon after the end of this event. So with this, I stop sharing my screen and I leave the floor to Lucrezia.
Okay, good morning to everyone. Thank you, Yuri, for introducing me, for inviting me to present today into this seminar. So I'm start sharing my screen. So during this presentation, I will give you also some questions to you in order to interact also during the presentation and not only at the end. When Yuri and Maria invited me to present into these seminars, I didn't know the audience, and I selected to be more general about the topic of my research that are, as Yuri introduced, related to the measure of sustainability in the agri-food sector. In the case in which my presentation is too basic, you can stop me and we will move to the last slides in which I will go further into the results of my research. But for me, it's important also to introduce the topic in which the background in which we developed, the way in which we are able today to measure sustainability. So let's free to stop me if it's really too basic for you. So first of all, we have to introduce what is sustainable agriculture. Into this slide, you can see the definition provided by FAO. So sustainable agriculture is not only crossing the three dimensions of sustainability, so environmental, social, and economics, but contributes also to all the four pillars of food security. So availability, access, utilization, and stability. As you can see here, there are 5 key principles of sustainability for food and agriculture that are presented into the slides and are increase productivity, protect and enhance natural resources, improve the livelihood and foster inclusive economic growth, enhance the resilience of people, communities, and ecosystems, and adapt governance to the new challenges. But if now today in 2025 we are speaking about sustainability, it's probably because we are aware that we are not so sustainable today. So I start with a question. You have to take your phone and scan this QR code in order to enter into the system. Okay, 3 people, 4 people. Okay, I will wait at least 20 people to start. Okay, so we start in order to avoid this time. The first question is about the planetary boundaries identified by Rockstrom et al. In 2009. Okay, most of you answered correctly. One of the 9 planetary boundaries identified by Rockstrom, it was the loss of genetic diversity. Okay, the fastest was Monica. And the second question is about the current concentration of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere. Okay. Also, in this case, most of you answered correctly. So we move again to the slides in which, as you can see here, we have a picture taken from the very famous publication of Rockstrom et al. in 2009, in which they defined the safe operating space for humanity, setting 9 planetary boundaries. In 2009, 3 of these 9 planetary boundaries have been crossed, and were the one about the emissions of carbon dioxide, the rate of biodiversity loss, and the one about the nitrogen use, so the amount of nitrogen removed from the atmosphere. In this publication, they set the proposed boundary, and also they measured the level in which we were 16 years ago in respect to these proposed boundaries. As you can see, some of them, like for instance, the atmospheric aerosol loading or the chemical pollution, have been defined as important, but without having the proper way to measure them having a boundary, and so without having a boundary, it was also impossible to select what is the current status in respect to this boundary. Some years after, the same group published another work that is a little bit an update of the first work of Rockstrom et al., in which the concept of planetary boundaries, first published in 2009, has been improved, introducing some more boundaries, and underlined again, in this case, that 4 of the 9 planetary boundaries have been crossed. The additional one is the one about the land system change. And again, has been defined that climate change and biosphere integrity are 2 core boundaries to define this safe space for humanity. So, considering that to measure climate change, we have a lot of indicators, we can start defining, considering also that one of the planetary boundaries already crossed is the one about the concentration of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We can start discussing about the climate change. So as you probably know, climate change is something of natural that the humans are able to improve, increasing the emissions of greenhouse gases. So this is taken from the last report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and in this case is underlined again that human activities through the emissions of greenhouse gases have caused global warming, with global surface temperature reaching 1.1 Celsius degree above the level that we have before. This is just to have a little introduction. I have another question for you. It's something that is written into this report, And so why global surface temperature will continue, I put again the QR code, to increase until at least the mid-century in all the media. Okay. In this case, we have a last answer, but most of them are the correct one. So this is one question based into some of the statements reported into the report I showed before. So the question is why global surface temperature will continue to increase. Also, if we imagine scenarios in which emissions are reduced, and this is why some of the greenhouse gases are very long-lasting into the atmosphere. And so also if we stop today to emit some of them, we cannot completely stop our emissions, of course. The effect cannot be immediate due to the lifetime of these gases into the atmosphere. We have another little question. About the difference between mitigation and adaptation in addressing climate change, and mitigation focuses on reducing the causes of the climate change, and so the emissions of greenhouse gases, while adaptation is to adapt to the effect of the climate change. At the end of, so the ranking will be shown at the end. So as you can see in the slide, mitigation is aimed at tackling the causes, while adaptation is to reduce the effect. So I added this definition just because into my presentation, also the one Yuri made at the start, I wrote that I work to mitigate in some way, or to find the best way to mitigate the effect of the climate change. And so the work we are doing is to reduce the emission of some gases, mainly greenhouse gases, related to the agri-food chain. We move a little bit to some other topics. Here, just to have an idea of what, but it's better to, I come back. I will show you the questions because I'm very, okay. This one is about a statement of the Cowspiracy documentary. Okay. Here we will see why it's not completely true what is written. And I move to a previous question, that is this one. What is the contribution of agriculture to global greenhouse gas emissions? Okay. So as you can see here is written, what is the contribution of agriculture to the global greenhouse gas emissions? While the other question was about the impact of the livestock sector. So if we move to the slides, you can see into this slide what is the contribution of the agriculture, forestry, and land use to the global greenhouse gas emission. These are results of some years ago, 2016, in which agriculture contributes to less than the 20% of the overall emissions. Into the right, you can see how much are the emissions related to agriculture in Europe. And if you check in Europe, agriculture is contributing to less than the 10% of the overall emissions of greenhouse gases. So considering that livestock is part of this sector, so it's part of, I'm sorry, but I'm into a class, and so we have also the birds. So as you can see here, agriculture accounts for the more or less the 20% at the global level and the 10% at European level. So considering that livestock is part of this sector, it is impossible that, and it was included into the second question, the first one I asked you to answer, that contributes to the half of the emissions overall, because livestock can be the half of the emissions related to agriculture and not the half of the overall emissions. So somewhere information are not always the proper ones. If we move to the food sector, you can see into this slide that food, so the whole agri-food system, not just agriculture, can contribute, can be slightly different considering different authors to the 26 or 34% of the overall emissions. While these numbers are different from the previous one, because in this case we are considering not only the agricultural sector, but also the following phases. So the transformation, the transportation, the packaging, the cooking phase, and so on. So from the 20% to the 30%, considering the agri-food system. And moreover, we have to consider that before, into the agricultural sector, there was included not only the agricultural production related to the food production, but also to other uses. So the agri-food system impacts more or less the 30% of our emissions. Okay, in this case, we have a lot of answers, but not always correct. The first one is the correct one. So methane has higher global warming potential than carbon dioxide, but lower than nitrous oxide. So we will see into the following slides. Here, what are the global warming potential? So we have this global warming potential to transform each one of the greenhouse gases into carbon dioxide equivalents. And this table is taken from the IPCC report and report for each one of the greenhouse gases, the global warming potential considering different time frames, so 20 years, 100 years, and 500 years. And for the first time in the last report, so the 6th report, the global temperature potential have been introduced into this report. So global temperature potential are different from the global warming potential because they considered how much the temperature will change at the end of the period of time. But now the scientific community is not always agree in using GTP instead of global warming potential. Also because the modeling to obtain this value is different and is more complicated. And because we have to consider how much the climate system responds to increased concentrations of greenhouse gases. And there are a few works in which GTP is used instead of GWP. What is the main difference? The main difference is about the methane emissions. As you can see into this table, if we consider global warming potential 100 and we compare the value to the one of global temperature potential 100, you can see that we have 27 for the global warming potential and 4.7 for the global temperature potential. Why is this difference? Because methane has a very short lifetime into the atmosphere, and so the effect into the temperatures, into the increase of temperatures using the GTP model are probably differently estimated, giving us these different values. So methane is more powerful than carbon dioxide, less powerful than nitrous oxide. These are the three main greenhouse gases related to agriculture, while the other greenhouse gases are more related to industrial uses because are refrigerants or fire extinguishers, so molecules used more into the industries or into the distribution phase, the refrigerant phase, and so on. Here I put a slide in which we have the comparison between results obtained for Austrian cattle carcass using two different metrics. So in this case, not GTP, but GVP star. GVP star is another metric similar to the one of the GTP. GTP is the one selected from the IPCC to be considered. GVP star is something of similar that consider differently the short-lived climate pollutants like methane, for instance, and is into the future probably we will find more works in which GVP star is used mainly into the livestock sector because, as you probably know, the methane emissions are due to the enteric fermentation, and a different accounting of methane can give us completely different results. As you can see here, in which using GVP star, as you can see into the right, we have a big reduction of the emissions due to the enteric methane. But how can we measure the impact? These numbers and these results, like the one of the previous slide, how can be obtained? The way in which we can obtain these results is considering the full life cycle from the cradle to the grave. And now with some little example, I will try to explain you why it is important to consider the full life cycle and not only one of the phases or one of the indicators you have, because I stressed now the importance of the greenhouse gas emissions, but we will see one indicator is not enough to pretend to measure the sustainability. The question was, we can consider biofuel carbon neutral, considering that the emissions of carbon dioxide we obtain after the combustion correspond exactly to the same amount of carbon dioxide has been stored during the carbon cycle into the plant. So, do you have to answer to this question? We put again the QR code. Okay. We can't avoid to consider all the processes we have before. So, of course, the emissions we have during the combustions corresponds to the amount of carbon dioxide stored before into the plant. This is true, but to obtain these biofuels, we have to produce them. So we have to grow the crops, to have a biorefinery system in which, for instance, biofuels are obtained. We have a distribution system, so we cannot consider them completely carbon neutral. And moreover, this is another point that is very important. When doing life cycle assessment, we cannot consider just one indicators. There are a lot of works focused just into the greenhouse gas emissions or the water footprint and so on, but really to measure the sustainability, to pretend to measure the sustainability of food or of crops, we need to consider more than one indicators. Because, for instance, in the case of biofuel, we have also the release of nutrients from fertilizers. We have other kind of inputs and impacts we can have related to the use of the production of biofuels. This is another example. This is taken from works made in Sweden, in which they compare organic versus conventional crops, considering in this case wheat and peas, and considering what is shown into this picture. What is your opinion about organic agriculture? Stop now. Depends. Depends is the proper answer. Is my favorite answer. So as you can see here, we have other works in which conventional and organic hot grains have been compared, and results can be very different considering different indicators. This is why one indicator is not enough. And moreover, another important thing to be considered when doing a life cycle assessment is the selection of the functional unit. As you can see, we have into this table 4 into the right, 3 different functional units. One is 1 tons, one is 1 hectares, and one other is 1,000 Canadian dollar. So results can be different using different functional unit. When doing a life cycle assessment, we cannot consider the quantity providing the same quantity providing the same function, but we have to consider what is the function of the what we are analyzing in order to report the results related to the function and not to the quantity. For instance, 1 ton can be useful in the moment in which we are comparing something in which the same quantity is able to provide the same function. But if we compare 1 ton of tomatoes with 1 ton of milk, the functions probably are not the same, and so we cannot exactly compare just using the quantity different food products. So life cycle assessment consider the whole life cycle from cradle to the grave. We cannot avoid to consider what happened before and after, and moreover consider a broad range of environmental issues. So using just one indicator is not enough to pretend to measure the sustainability of a production. Moreover, it's quantitative and based into models that are based on proven causalities. Life cycle assessment is based also on standards and into these standards for different life cycle. In doing life cycle assessment, we have to follow 4 different steps. The first one is goal and scope definition, followed by the inventory, in which we collect data, the impact assessment, in which we transform the data into the impact, and at the end, the interpretation. What is very critical is to select the functional unit, as I explained before, because this is the reference of the study, and we have to compare properly the function and not just the amount. This is the last question for you. I will stop it before the time. Yeah, we have a lot of different answers. The proper one is the second one, no, because we cannot consider the function of food just to provide a certain amount of food, because 1 kilogram of meat is different from 1 kilogram of food from a nutritional point of view. If we have to compare two different foods, we have to compare the same nutritional content of this food. So this is why often it's difficult to evaluate the sustainability in the food sector. And there are a lot of works also supported by the FAO to find the proper nutritional functional unit in order to have a common way to assess the sustainability into the food sector. Just to show you an application in a few minutes of how life cycle assessment can help us to assess sustainability in agriculture, I will present you some data obtained in a project funded by the Italian Ministry of the Environment, in which my university has been involved since the start in 2010. So this program is called VIVA, and it's based on 4 indicators. What has been our work into this project? Our work has been to develop 4 indicators specific for the wine sector that are into the slides are called in Italian, but you can easily understand the translation: air, water, vineyard, and territory. So we developed the framework in which the sustainability of wine sector can be assessed. Not only 1 indicator, but more than 1. And also into territory, we added something related to economy and society, because we have to remember that sustainability cannot be just environmental, from an environmental point of view. After the evaluation, the ones that have the certification can show into the bottle the label you can see into the right, and scanning the QR code, it is possible to see the results obtained from the certified bottles and understand what are the impacts, for instance, into the greenhouse gas emissions, into the water scarcity, into the vineyard due to the management of vineyard, and also the ones related to the socio-economic part of the sustainability using the territory indicators. These kind of instruments developed into the Viva framework can also be useful to compare, again, as we have seen before, two different ways to produce. Like, for instance, into this work, we compared again organic with conventional, in this case, viticulture. Again, results can be different considering different functional unit, and the question is again, what is the best functional unit in this case? It's better to consider the surface or the quantity of wine produced, considering that the wine is the product that at the end is actually sold. Results can be different considering different functional unit, but also considering different indicators. So often to have an answer is not so easy as we thought at the start, because we have the instrument to measure, but the instrument sometimes provides some results difficult to be understood. So we have to evaluate differently the different results provided. Here is another work in which we applied, in this case, the PEF methodology. PEF is the methodology developed by the European Commission to assess the sustainability following the life cycle assessment approach. In this case, we worked with different farms producing milk to produce grana padano, and we compared the impacts of the permanent meadows farm we have into the Mantova district in Italy to the mountains farms that produce grana padano in Trentino, the small plain farm, and with the mountain, small plain, permanent meadows with the national average of farms producing milk. In this case, the best results are the ones of the permanent meadows farm, because if we consider a product like the milk, what is very important is the feed production, and the permanent meadows allow, in this case, to reduce the impact due to the self-produced feed. And so in this case, the results showed the best performance for this kind of farms. So this is another way in which life cycle assessment can be used into the agri-food sector. Another example is the one in which we tried to apply life cycle assessment approaches into the evaluation of the circular economy systems. Because as you know, to move from a linear system to a circular system is mandatory to be more sustainable, but often the way we find to be circular are more impacting than the normal way in which residues or wastes are used like waste. So this is an example developed in a project in which we used Hermezza and Lucens to transform fruit and vegetable wastes into their biomass, mainly made with fat and protein, to transform them into energy. The energy production is through a pyrolysis plant in which biochar can be obtained, and also the effect of biochar has been tested as a soil amendment and also as an instrument to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Results have been published related to the Emilia-Romagna region into this paper. You can scan the QR code, but I can send you all the references. And really, we tested also another possibility to use a black soldier fly, not only to produce energy, so to transform them into biofuel, but also to use them directly to feed other animals. Also, if now, considering the regulations we have in Europe and in Italy, the use of a black soldier fly fed into the waste is not allowed to produce feed that can be used again to feed other animals. So we tested this way without can use it due to the regulations we have. Here you can see the results compared to the normal treatment of waste into the Emilia-Romagna and into the left, into the table, and into the right, into the graph, the comparison of the different system we tested, because we tested a different mix of wastes and also different efficiency due to the different condition in which black soldier fly can be used to transform them. The goal was to transform the fat contained into the black soldier fly into biofuel by doing a transesterification. And as you can see into the right, the best option is using high efficiency because we have a lower feed conversion ratio, so we are able to obtain more larvae using less ingredient and using a mixed food residues in which not only vegetables but the introduction of other kind of waste are added to improve the nutritional quality of the substrates provided to the larvae. And in some of the indicators provided into the graph into the right, this kind of transformation is more sustainable than the production of biofuel from soybean. So it depends on the indicators we use, but can be an opportunity to transform in some cases the waste into something that can be used, but we have to be aware that sometimes we are improving the impacts if in comparison to the normal treatment of waste into the Emilia-Romagna. So these are just some examples of how life cycle assessment can help us in solve the problem of sustainability into the agri-food system, so we can use it to obtain the most sustainable way to produce. We can use it into an eco-design approach to design before doing the best way to use something or to produce something. Can be useful, and I think it's very useful in designing circular system, because always we think that something can be sustainable, but without having the proper instruments to measure the sustainability, we cannot say that the reuse or the recycling is always the most sustainable way to use the residues. So in conclusion, what is the life cycle assessment? Is a compass needed to address sustainability. Sustainability must be measured and not only declared, because we agree we need to be sustainable. We know that at the moment we are completely unsustainable, but to do something, we have to follow the results of some measures to find the proper way to be more sustainable. Life cycle assessment is based into the models. We developed a lot of models, for instance, about the proper way to measure the impact of pesticides into the environment. And these models must be updated over time, considering the knowledge we are developing into this field. And often the best solution is a compromise between different results, because it's very difficult to find a solution that is the best from all the perspectives, but different kind of results must be integrated in order to have the best solution for the problem we have. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, also if very basic, but to explore better the opportunity of life cycle assessment, we will need more time. In the case in which you need something more, or in the case in which you have some questions, I'm here to answer you. And in the case in which you would like to write me, I can provide you my email, and we can continue our discussion also by email.
Okay, so thank you, Lucrezia, for this very interesting seminar. So now the floor is open for questions. So whoever has question may raise the hand or type the question in the chat, and I will read it.
Show you that the winner is Gianluca.
Gianluca, so
I don't know if Gianluca is really pregnant, but
I guess no.
but he's the winner.
Okay, thank you.
Followed by Maria and Alessandro.
My pleasure.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat by Valentino. He thanked Lucrezia. He thanked Lucrezia for the presentation. And the question is, what is your opinion on taking account of ecosystem services provided in a process? For instance, in agriculture, when assessing LCA, some scientists have proposed to allocate the whole CO2 equivalent balance of a farm, sharing it among main products and co-products as well. It has ecosystem services provided. Soil fertility could be one of these possible co-products to be taken into account in order to allocate the whole CO2 equivalent balance of a farm. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's very interesting. As I mentioned before, when we define functional unit, when considering agriculture, there are a lot of functions that agriculture is providing that are not only the production of food. So in the moment in which we shift from the production of food, we can introduce the accounting of all the other services provided by agriculture, like, for instance, other ecosystem services. There are growing literature into the accounting of ecosystem services using a life cycle assessment. The problem at the moment I'm seeing, this is just my opinion, is to have a consensus model that can be used in order to obtain standardized results. And moreover, another opportunity I'm seeing for agricultural production to include the benefit of agriculture into a life cycle assessment is to consider the as you probably mentioned also during your question, is to consider the carbon dioxide stock in agriculture, for instance, shifting from a conventional agriculture to conservative one, using carbon farming instead of other way to make agriculture. So something is changing, but at the moment, I agree to consider all the other services provided by agriculture, like impact that can be positive or negative, must be measured before confirmed this. But the current problem is that we haven't a consensus model. I think we will have, because there are a lot of works in this direction, and also policies are going into this direction.
Okay,
now for the explanation, Professor Lamastra.
Sorry, Valentino, could you repeat, please?
Sorry. Thank you again, Professor Lamastra, for your explanations. Sorry for my technical difficulties on the internet connection, so I'm not able to. Probably my comments I gave right now were didn't reach the platform. Again, thank you for all the explanation. There are all the points that you mentioned are very interesting insights in view of considering further options and promoting the role of agriculture in the environment conservation. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you too, Valentino.
Now there's a question by Heribert Int'l. Heribert.
Yes, thank you for this very interesting talk. I have a question concerning the different cattle raising systems that you have shown, and it's a bit contradicting to that what I am teaching, or I used to teach to my students, that the cattle raising with concentrated feed, maybe from soybean, evolves less carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases because of the microbiota in the rumen. So the rumen microbiota seems to be more targeted towards producing methane if hay or grass is used as a feedstock, than when concentrated feed is being used. Actually, I'm basing this on a study made in Italy. I don't recall who the authors were, but that was quite nicely showing the big difference in methane emissions by the rumen microbiota.
Okay, so in this case we consider the bull life cycle. Mainly we can say that the carbon footprint of 1 liter of milk is divided into 3 main processes contributing to the emissions, that are the enteric fermentation, the feed supply, the feed production and supply, and the manure management. In this case, we estimated the methane emissions considering the guidelines of the IPCC and considering, of course, the nutritional content of the different feed. We analyzed them. So we used a tier 3 approach in which we have specific information about the different feed, the one obtained from insulate, but also the one obtained from grassland. And we have probably an increase into the enteric fermentation, but what is reduced into this case is the production of feed. So if I share again the screen just to explain better what I'm trying to explain. The differences are very, very little. So here you can see the national near face for national Italian representative farms, while into the right you have a permanent meadows farm. As you can see, weighted and normalized the results are very similar for 1 liter of milk. What is different? If you calculate the percentage, probably is the amount of self-produced feed that contribute, considering that permanent meadows don't require a lot of work to be cropped, require less input. So in this case, permanent meadows farm contributes as the same as the national Italian representative farms in which insulate are used. And here the advantage is not in the phase of the enteric fermentation, but in the phase in which we are producing feed.
Okay. Well,
And moreover, you have to consider that this kind of farms into the Mantova district are very particular because we selected 70 farms to make this study, but they have a very high efficiency, also if reducing the nutritional value of the feed provided. So it's a very particular case in Italy, because as you can see, for instance, mountain farms that use the same kind of feed, the same nutrition, have higher impacts. So MF and
Okay.
PMF have the same kind of nutrition, showing different results. So it's a particularity of this kind of permanent meadows farm into the Mantua district that are able to combine high efficiency while using grass products, mortgages, and the advantage is the reduction of the input due to the self-production feed, and
Yeah.
a slight reduction into.
Okay, yeah, this corresponds quite well with that what I thought. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Heribert. Now it's time for the question of Rebecca.
Hi, thank you very much for your interesting talk. For me, were many new concepts. My question may be silly, but I have to do it since I work a long time with cyanobacteria, which are photosynthetic organisms. So you present some, okay, how the CO2 is biologically produced for organisms and then fixed by photosynthetic organisms entering the cycle, which I understood. But then you showed that is CO2 produced by biofuels, so for the industry, is not taken by the photosynthetic organisms. So I was wondering from the ignorance, why if this CO2 is maybe related with other, I don't know, composed in the atmosphere, or they are not available as CO2 in the atmosphere, or why the photosynthetic organisms will not take that CO2. Sometimes I just feel my cultures with CO2, inorganic CO2, and then they are capable to fix this CO2. Do you know my question?
Yes,
Maybe
yes,
it's a stupid question, sorry.
No. Is you can help me to explain better. For instance, that biogenic carbon dioxide is not taken into account into the life cycle assessment in general. But for instance, methane, biogenic methane is taken into account. Biogenic carbon dioxide not. Okay, this is the basic into the life cycle assessment, and I presented you a consideration just to explain you to consider one phase is not enough, because for instance, the emissions during the combustion of biofuel, but can be also wood, for instance, are not considered the emissions of carbon dioxide because are considered biogenic, and the amount emitted is considered equivalent to the amount that has been stored before into the plant structures used to produce the biofuels or wood, for instance. I agree with you that we have a lot of other way to store and to use carbon dioxide. At the moment, not considering into life cycle assessment. For instance, I would like to do a work in which we are able to estimate them, because it's another opportunity to completely understand the impact of agriculture without considering just the emissions we already know, but some benefits from which we have to know something more that probably we know into the field, but outside when someone else doing life cycle assessment that doesn't know how agriculture works probably has not an idea of this kind of effect. So like the first question, so we have to do something more to develop life cycle assessment related to agriculture, considering not only the carbon dioxide emission biogenic, that is very easy to be understood and to be explained, but also some other opportunity agriculture has to store carbon dioxide, but also to provide other kind of services that can be very useful from an environmental point of view.
Okay, thank you.
Vittorio, now it's your turn.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Lucrezia. I mean, for me, I learned a lot, and I think for many scientists like me who are very, let's say, fixed in one topic and genetics or some specific mechanism, to listen to this kind of to your talk is very important. So my question is very general. I mean, I just like to have your feedback on what is the state and what is your belief of this? I mean, I'm not an expert, but I read about carbon capture by the soil. So the soil, as we know today, is the most biodiverse, I don't know, a niche or a place on the planet. There's more microbes on the earth than anything, and it's where everything starts. And also the earth we know it's so important for the One Health concept. Human health starts from the soil. So, and I read about carbon capture from the soil. The microbes using carbonic anhydrases can fix CO2, or I don't know. What is your belief of this? Is this too optimistic, or is this realistic that in the future scientists can develop mechanism to fix CO2 and bring it to the, then this can then be provided, cementized or provided to plants or whatever. I really like to have your feedback. Thank you.
No, I hope that our idea, that is your idea, is not too optimistic, that so in the future we can have this opportunity to have a consensus model to assess this kind of benefit into the future. So what I think is that at the moment the soil is completely underestimated into the life cycle assessment approach, because if you check all the most used 15 indicators about soil, there is just land use. Okay, so a measure of the land used to produce something without any specific sub-indicators to consider the quality of the soil. And so, okay, it is important to reduce the use of soil, but we have also to separate the different uses of soils, because there are some uses that are real soil consumption and some others in which soil can be improved and can provide a lot of services. So for instance, from the life cycle assessment approaches, two footprints have been very commonly considered, like carbon footprint and water footprint, but no one about the quality of soil. So also, if soil is fundamental for agriculture, for biodiversity, for a lot of services, at the moment it's completely underestimated into the life cycle assessment approach. I think that now we are moving to the carbon farming approach. Something is changing, and I hope that in the future more important will be given to the soil. I think that now soil is underestimated also because this kind of approach, the life cycle assessment, born into the industry sector. So, and after this has been translated into the agricultural sector. And so at the moment we are adapting something that is born for other purposes. And now is the moment to develop a proper way to assess this kind of benefit or something like benefit also using this approach.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions for Lucrezia from the audience? No, so I think we can thank Lucrezia for this interesting event.
Thank you too. Thank you to everyone for participating. My slides can be shared with all the present and as my contacts too. So if you would like to go further into this discussion, I will be available to discuss further with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations. Very nice presentation and very clear. You're a very good speaker. Thank you.
Thank you too, Vittorio.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you again, Lucrezia. And just before let's say, closing the event, I want to remind you again the next appointment of our webinar, which is on the 6th of February with the topic of biostimulant. So thank you again for joining and for the discussion.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.